So, Ollie, last time we talked about photography, and then you asked me how many pictures I take when I was on my last holiday.
Yes, I did.
And today we're going to talk about aircraft. So, the most obvious question then would be to ask, how many times did you fly?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I made a round trip in France when I was like very young, but I think that was only for like 50 minutes. So that's one time. I went to London, to Rome, to Malta, and to Lisbon. So that's 4 times back and forth. 4 times 2 is 8, plus that one is 9. However, tomorrow I'll be heading to Athens.
Ah,
So that will make 10.
okay. So, do you have any idea how much fuel your airplane burned during that time?
Oh, I do not want to know.
So,
I know there's a Wikipedia page on mileage. I think it's called that way for aircraft as well.
Oh.
Quite some, actually.
okay. So I did some calculations because I knew you were heading off to Athens tomorrow, and I just want to guilt trip you. So here we go. A average 737-800
Okay.
spans about 3,200 liters per hour.
Okay, so it's like 3 hours of flight.
Yeah, it's 3 hours and 10 minutes.
6 hours when you would take the return trip into account as well.
Yeah, okay. So I only took the one trip, the one way. So that equates to about 10,133 liters during the entire flight.
Ouch.
And if you divide that by number of passengers per kilometer, then you get only 0.03 liters per passenger per kilometer. So then it suddenly sounds pretty good.
That's not
Yeah.
that much. Yeah, I made a video on that as well, as you might know. I compared a regular aircraft to some cars, some, modern cars. And if you have one or two people in your car, an aircraft is actually less damaging to the environment than a car is. Well, less damaging is not the correct word, but it uses less fuel. It's different fuel, so that can have an effect, of course.
Okay, so I wonder what kind of aircraft you compared it to, because what I noticed is that, for example, the 747, the big one with the big bulge on top,
Yeah.
that one seems to be consuming, let me think, I think it's even less. Or
I think it should be less as well, but I'm not certain. What I did in my calculation, I think I took a 737 as well.
okay.
But I would have to check that out. It's been a year, I think.
But the interesting thing to me is, so I looked up the miles per gallon for a Toyota Prius,
Uh-huh.
which is 52 miles per gallon, and that's weird units. So I translated that.
You had to convert that to standards, like we've talked about earlier.
Right. So that equates to 4.52 liters per 100 kilometers, or
So that's like 1 in 20, 1 in 22.
yeah, something like that. Or calculated in liters per kilometer per passenger, it's 0.009. So that
And what was the aircraft again?
0.03 instead of 0.009 for the Toyota Prius.
Okay, this is hard, but what is the ratio between the two?
It's about 3 in that case. It's almost 0.01.
Yeah, all those zeros make it hard to...
Yeah, I'm sorry. So it's about 3 times less liters.
Okay, that does not make such a significant difference. But still.
This, of course, is a Toyota Prius, so it doesn't spend so much fuel. So yeah, that's some numbers before we...
That's fun fact number 1 of today, but I've got a few more. You know that?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Okay, TLDR, China. Okay?
All right.
I
Sounds
want to
good.
start like 2,500 years ago in China, like I mentioned, kite flying. Have you ever wondered about that? That is, 2,500 years old, actually.
I would never have thought it would be that old, but on the other hand, I guess it makes sense, because how many times do you flung something up in the air and it stays afloat and you wonder, wait, can I control that?
Especially a piece of paper or
Right.
plastic, something lightweight, it will just float away. And if you can attach it to a string, well, you've got yourself a kite.
Yeah, with some structural support, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, of course, it's not that easy, but it's a start. And the Chinese guys were actually quite smart. They did it for fun, I guess, but they also used it to measure distance, to test the wind, and to communicate.
Wait.
And also, fun fact number 2, to lift man.
Wait, could you go back and explain to me the first and the third use for kites?
To test the wind, you mean?
No, you said to measure distance?
Oh yeah, that was the first one I mentioned. I do not know exactly.
Okay.
I haven't looked into that, but I guess to communicate, you can use it just to make a sign like something is happening, and you can propagate a sign by lighting a fire. Was also one of the ways you could use to propagate a signal. And I guess flying a kite could do the same.
Okay, yeah, I see.
Anyway, the fourth one was most interesting to me, to lift man. Because men carrying kites were invented around 500, 600 years after the birth of Christ, like to use for military, civil, or punishment measures.
Oh, but did it ever work?
I guess so.
Like, how big would your kite have to be?
Well, quite severe, I guess. Like 2 or 3 square meters.
So, small editorial here. There is actually a Wikipedia page on men lifting kites, and you should look it up. It's actually pretty fun to read through. But sadly, it doesn't really give any numbers on when, or I mean how big the kites were, but judging from the pictures, it's anywhere between, like, let's say 3, 4, 5 square meters or so.
Yeah. Legend says it was also used in Japan. Well, men carrying kites, but they were actually a bit smaller because they forbid it. Because you can imagine a lot of people died using men carrying kites.
Oh, right. That reminds me of a story. I think it was Mythbusters, where they tested this myth where some guy used a weather balloon to lift himself up in a chair. And the myth goes that he was, I don't know, drinking beer or anything. And by the time he was done, he was drunk and he didn't know he was already, I don't know, a kilometer up or something. And he didn't know how to go down. So he died.
That's a weird story. Was it busted or was it fireball?
It was totally confirmed. You don't even need weather balloons. I think you can use big helium balloons as well, but you can totally lift yourself up. The most obvious choice, of course, would be to have many balloons and take a gun so you can shoot several down. And then you can slowly go down again. But yeah.
I was still... I know you said multiple balloons, but I still had one big balloon in my mind. And when you said gun, I was thinking about shooting that only one balloon you had. I think.
Right. Yeah.
And for a split second, I thought that's the most stupid idea you could think of. And then it just popped into my mind that you said multiple balloons.
Right. So I'm not entirely sure if the guy indeed used one balloon or not. But even then, it's like... it's a stupid story.
It's quite funny indeed. Anyway, China, they did some other pretty interesting things as well. Like they had a toy which is sort of a small helicopter in around 400 BC. It's called the bamboo copter, and it was a toy for children also in China. And another thing was the sky lantern, and we still use that today. Well, not today, mostly in New Year's Eve, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Those paper balloons with a small lamp or candle, which lifts the sky lantern there. Let me see, what was it called again? It had another name. Wish balloons.
Yeah, wishing balloons, yes. And
yeah, that was what I was thinking about.
These little buggers even work so well that they are prohibited in the Netherlands. You can't use them anymore because they cause danger for aviation.
Yeah, I heard about that. How high can they go? Like a kilometer or something?
Maybe even higher, because if it's a kilometer or 2, then if you're around a major airport, that can already be pretty significant danger.
Yeah, especially in a small country like the Netherlands.
Right.
You're always close to Amsterdam. Let me see. On average, they can reach a height of approximately 3,000 feet. So that's, well, a kilometer.
Okay, yeah.
Huh, interesting. Okay, now let's skip China for a second and let's go to Spain. Because what is the most obvious way to start flying? If you look at nature, you would think, well, let's imitate a bird, you know?
Yeah.
Big wings, feathers,
Fall down a cliff.
Yeah, so they started doing that. What they actually did is they jumped off a building.
Oh, right.
Yeah, in 852 AD. Not the most smart idea.
Well, you gotta start somewhere, right? I mean, what else would you do?
The dude who did it first, well, the first recorded one, Armand Furman, I mean, he did survive with injuries because his big wings did slow him down, but I would not recommend that.
From how high did he jump?
I was wondering about that as well, but I just could not find it.
Oh, okay.
I guess several meters, like 10, 20, 30 maybe.
Couple stories, yeah.
Yeah, well, don't do that, please.
I'm not very inclined to try that now.
Okay, I'm glad. Another quite cool idea, which is quite old, is of course Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes.
And what you might know is that he lived in the end of the 15th century. Mm-hmm. But what you might not know is that his work was not known until 1797. So it had no influence on the science 200 years after his death.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Not that it mattered that much, because his work was not really scientific.
But so are you really talking about the devices he made? Because if I do recall correctly, he also made a book about mechanics. And
oh, he did do indeed stuff, but his flying devices, like he called it, I think, were not used or known till 1800.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
What he did know, though, and that's quite cool, I've got a quote over here, and who does that remind you of? An object offers as much resistance to the air as the air does to the object.
Newton, I would say.
Yeah, but Leonardo da Vinci was born before Newton, so he already figured that out. But that was discovered later, I guess.
If he would have only been smart enough to think about the mechanics.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, no, but the guy did so many things. I mean, it's really impressive.
Yeah, Da Vinci had, who was it? A few episodes ago, we were talking about a guy who also had 10 professions.
Oh, by the way. Oh, wait, yeah, so wait, who were you talking about now? Galileo or Da Vinci?
Da Vinci.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Galileo.
Galileo. Did he
that guy
do stuff as well, actually?
Wrote a book about mechanics and made all sorts of observations about the sky. I'm totally confusing two people there now.
Oops. Now, Da Vinci as well had made advances in a lot of fields. Let me Google him real quick.
I'm looking at this Wikipedia page, but it's all art.
It is?
Oh wait, scientific studies. Let's see. Anatomy.
Inventor, painter, sculptor, scientist, mathematics, engineer.
Yeah, engineering. So all his devices were still considered scientific in the sense of engineering.
Yeah, right.
Okay, cool.
Anyways, his ideas were quite interesting. Maybe you know about that. He had the sort of glider.
Yeah.
Also was a rotational device, which was also tested by Mythbusters, if I remember correctly. But I'm not 100% certain about that. Anyway, like I said, it was not really scientific, so it did not work.
Okay, so then what's the next step? Because we already made a jump from 2000 before to 500 after, and now we're already 1700s?
1500 actually. But
yeah, okay.
Yeah, those were all cool ideas, but they were not really feasible to carry man. So we're talking now about some modern thoughts, like the lighter than air thought. And I want to talk about Francesco Lana de Terzi. I think that's his name. He's Italian. And what he was thinking about is a copper foil made into a sphere containing a vacuum. So what you would do is make a near perfect sphere out of copper, pump the air out of it, and that would have a lower density than air. So that would make it fly. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Okay, what he did not think about, though, is how to make a near-perfect sphere, because even with modern technology, we cannot do that.
Yeah, also trying to get a vacuum in that sphere, because I suppose you need a pretty thick material to keep the vacuum inside, and then you can't already float anymore.
Yeah, that's indeed a problem. You need like a foil, like a really, really thin material, but you also need to keep its structural integrity, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like all sorts of things.
It was a good idea, but not feasible again. What you just talked about, balloons, like the myth you were talking about, that is actually a whole step further. In 1783, the hot air balloons were introduced. They not only used hot air, but also hydrogen, and that stopped actually the building jumping. Do you know why?
No?
Well, they started jumping from balloons. It's not much better, but it's correct, I think.
But did they even manage to fly down from buildings?
No, but now you could jump from way higher.
Oh, man.
Which is definitely a smart idea, right?
People are stupid.
Yep, TLDR, people are stupid.
But okay, so then we got balloons, so people die from jumping off balloons, and then hopefully that stops.
Again, not recommended.
Yes.
Yeah, so one thing that looks like a balloon, but is actually a bit different, an airship, like for example a Zeppelin.
Yes.
First introduced in 1852, so that's already 80 years after the balloons started getting developed as well. First flight by Giffard. Do you know what his first name was?
No?
Henry.
Oh, Henry Ford. The guy from Ford.
No, Henry Giffard. Giffard.
Oh, Giffard. Ah.
Giffard.
Another Henry, yes. This trend needs to keep coming.
Yep, that was the only reason I mentioned him.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
pretty-
that was lighter than air, but if you think about a modern airplane, it's definitely heavier than air. But you need to be, well, a bit smarter, I guess. So Tito Livio Buratini was the first to create a model with 4 fixed glider wings, like an aircraft. You've got 2 wings on both sides, and they were fixed. So you don't imitate a bird anymore. You don't flap with the wings. You have just 4 fixed glider wings. And what he did actually is he managed to successfully lift a cat
Yeah.
in 1648.
Poor cat.
So that's, yeah, poor cat. But that's 350 years ago. That's quite impressive, you know?
Okay, yeah, that's...
Yeah.
It's still only a cat, but even then...
Well, it's a start. He promised that only the most minor injuries would result from landing the craft. So I guess safety engineering was a thing back then, but not really.
On an unrelated note, cats can actually fall from pretty tall heights and still land safely. Destin did
I saw a GIF about that earlier today.
Oh, really?
It will be in the show notes, but also the one you're talking about right now, right?
Yeah, so Destin did an episode about that on Smarter Every Day, and he talked about it as well on his podcast. No Dumb Questions.
How they manage to flip around, right?
Yes.
And how they always land on 4 feet. I have seen that one.
Yeah, and also why they can then fall from pretty tall heights without injury or minor injury.
Interesting mechanics.
Yeah. If you want to know how it works, I can't remember, so you gotta watch the video.
It's in the show notes. And although you might be the king of educational YouTube videos, do you know who the king is of airplanes? Oh, well, the father of aeroplanes, like he's called. It's Sir George Cayley.
Oh, I thought about the brothers Wright, but that's two
Yeah,
guys.
we're coming to that. We're getting a bit close, actually.
Okay.
Sir George Cayley did some heavy research in how to scientific understand the principles of flight, of bird flight, actually. And what he did, he also conducted some scientific experiments considering aerodynamic drag and streamlining, and all those basic experiments needed for the brothers Wright to get the first airplane.
Yeah, so that's to me pretty interesting how many things come together with an airplane. It's like mechanics, aerodynamics, material science.
Very complicated.
Yeah, and all these things were needed before the brothers Wright could even start to make a proper model.
Yeah, because the brothers Wright were born a bit earlier than the 1900s. They started developing the aircraft in the 1900s. But way before that, the steam engine was already invented. Because in 1842, the first motorized, well, it's not technically a glider anymore, but sort of uncontrolled glider was motorized by a guy called Hansen. And even 6 years after that, this one was not motorized, by the way, also by the guy I just mentioned, Sir George Cayley. He even managed to glide a small boy.
Okay, I hope that was not his kid or anything.
No, it was a local boy from the village. His name unknown.
Was it voluntary basis?
I hope so.
Me too, yeah.
I could imagine it was not actually. Anyway, you were talking about the Wright brothers, and like I said, they started developing the aircraft in the 1900s. The first one was actually exactly in the year 1900, and their second one as well, if I remember correctly, but they both failed, actually. Both gliders just, they couldn't fly.
Well,
yeah, what they tried to do is made a controllable glider, so they could steer, they could maintain their height if they wanted it to. So what they did, and that's why I think those two brothers, Orville and Wilbur, are actually the fathers of aviation, because what they did is they made 200 different designs. They built a wind tunnel, and they just experimented with all those things. And yeah, they corrected drag and lift calculations so they could make the perfect glider. So their third test in 1902, which was controlled, did fly. I mean,
and I never thought about that you would need so many iterations, but it makes a whole lot of sense, of course, because you just keep trying and trying until you got a working design. But that they did this only in 2 years, that's pretty impressive.
It is. I had also in mind that they just made a, glider, and they tried it and they succeeded, and poof, they were the first man to fly. But they did work like really hard to do this.
I mean, that's never really how designing works, of course, but you just never really think about it.
No, it's just what I had in mind, but it's total nonsense if you even think about it. Their first successful flight, the third one they tested, that they flew for 12 seconds, 37 meters, which means 11 kilometers per hour, which is quite impressive, actually. 11 kilometers per hour and still flying.
Yeah, I mean that's even compared to, for example, electric planes, which we will get to during my part. But yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. It is. The same day they also tested a few. They did a few other tries, and their record of the day was 260 meters, which they flew in a bit less than 1 minute.
Oh wow!
Yeah, quite impressive.
That's already way better.
Yeah, they flew at 6 meters high to make sure they did not, crash and injure themselves.
Die.
Yeah, die, okay. Indeed. Yeah, the flights were witnessed by 3 coastal life-saving crewmen, the Wikipedia page says, a local businessman, and a boy from the village.
Also
I do not know why. I do not know why they had to specifically mention that. But
maybe so he could tell all his friends how cool these guys are, and then like spread the legend about these guys.
That could be true. Yeah, that could be it. What is quite interesting though is that a German called Weißkopf, he moved to America, so he changed his name to Whitehead, which exactly means the same thing.
Yep.
He claims to be the first one to have a controllable working aircraft. But he just could not prove it. Nobody saw it. And a few others made claims as well. Weißkopf is the one with the most viable claim, I think. But I think we can say the brothers Wright were the first one to successfully have a controllable glider. Quite awesome, right?
Yeah, pretty cool. And from there on, it was still so many more improvements that brought us to today.
Yeah, what helped was the First World War.
The first what?
The World War.
Oh,
World War One.
yes.
Yes, of course, because 12 years later, 1914, well, airplanes were already used. They were used for spying, bombing, and they started developing guns on aircraft, which is, I guess, quite useful for military purposes.
People never change, do they? They see a nice invention and they think, how can we kill people with this?
Yahoo!
But yeah,
it is quite useful, though.
Yeah, of course. It brought brought us a whole lot of improvements on the design.
Because in those 4 years of war, airplanes got developed quite rapidly. Because the first transatlantic flight, non-stop from New York to Paris, that's almost 6,000 kilometers, was in 1927. That's like 25 years after the first flight. And you can already fly 6,000 kilometers,
Wow.
which is mind-blowing, you know?
Yeah, that's how many more times the distance that the brothers Wright first flew. I mean,
that was like 37 meters, so you gotta divide those two. 6,000 kilometers is 6 million. I lost the zeros.
Yeah.
6 million meters divided by 37 equals 126,000 times further in 25 years.
And
it's impressive.
And imagine if the fuel used would scale linearly with the miles flown, it would be immense. Like how big this thing would have to be. But they made such nice improvements that they either increased the efficiency of the motors or the design of the airplane, so it needed less fuel. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, wow, that's the only word you can say, I guess. Wow. But then the Second World War came around, and military aircraft got developed further. One aircraft named the Lancaster, I do not know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Actually, quite interesting. Was used for transporting military objects, but because it was quite large, after the Second World War, the airplane was used for commercial aviation.
Yeah.
Because it could store several people as well.
I read that as well, that in like the 1950s, the first generation of airplanes was partly refurbished military planes.
Quite smart, actually. You had no use for them anyway, so...
Yeah, why not try to fly people with them? It's maybe not that safe, but, gotta start somewhere.
Indeed. Just like the Concorde, which was developed in 1976,
Yes.
the commercial aircraft which can fly faster than sound.
Yeah, I'm gonna still talk about that one as well. So yeah, go ahead.
It was where I wanted to quit anyway. But what I wanted to mention is the Concorde was obviously not the first plane to surpass the sound barrier. It was actually just after the Second World War in 1947 by Charles Albert Yeager.
Was it the MiG?
No, the Bell X-1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Fun fact though, Charles Albert Yeager is still alive today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was the first. The first confirmed, actually. And then one very, very important thing when you're talking about aviation is 1961. Yuri Gagarin, do you know him?
Yeah, he's the astronaut, right? Cosmonaut.
Yep, he was the first one to go into space, and I think that's a whole other topic, but
yeah, space
it
flight.
is aviation, technically, so I just wanted to mention him. And 1961, first man to space. 1976, first commercial aircraft, the Concorde, which surpassed the sound barrier, and you already feel that the improvements are coming close to today. And that's where I wanted to quit, actually, because you know what a modern plane looks like, and what will it continue to look like? That's the question, of course.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna pick up right where you ended, because the Concorde will need some introduction first, because I wanted to start off my segment with the question, but what do you expect from a future airplane? What would you think could be possible improvements made?
Okay, what you started the episode with is that an airplane has needs quite some fuel. So that is one improvement you could think about. What I would also want is faster getting to my destination.
Mm-hmm.
More people, but also more space, of course.
Yeah, okay.
I think those two aren't counterintuitive. Or how do you
Well,
say
I
that?
mean, at some point you don't really have. I mean, if you make the airplane bigger, you also need more fuel, and with more fuel, you get heavier. So you need again more fuel to take up the heavier plane. So yeah, that doesn't converge always to one solution.
Nope, it is not. But I guess that's it. What did you think about? You already introduced electric flights, I think.
Yes. So fuel efficiency or alternative fuel sources are indeed one thing that I thought about. Faster is indeed also one thing that I thought about, and maybe safer as well.
They are already pretty safe, of course.
Indeed. So we'll get to that. But first off, faster. I mean, what happened to Concorde that it stopped in 2003? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I know the answer, but it's not a fun thing to talk about, I guess.
No, okay, but I mean, what was the problem with Concorde?
Yeah, they were not safe enough, right? They, what was it? They had some major crashes. And also, when you go to the sound barrier, you get that massive boom behind it.
Yes.
Which is not that nice.
Mm-hmm. So indeed, I think there were two problems with Concorde. One indeed was the safety. It was not that safe compared to other aircrafts, but also economically, I think it didn't do so well. I'm not sure who manufactured it. Let me look that up. But at least
I think it was British Airways.
Yeah, together with Air France.
Air France.
I think so. Yeah, it was a collaboration between those two. Anyway, there were quite a few Concordes ordered by aircraft companies, although I think there was indeed one incident at an air show, and after that, like, all these orders got cancelled, and in the end, only 40 or so? Oh wait, no, only 20 were built. So
the air show is the perfect place to market your aircraft, and
exactly,
if it fails at that point, you know your business is screwed.
Yeah, but even then, they still sold 20 aircraft, so it's not that bad, and that's also, I think, why it's even managed to get to 2003. But yeah, there are some problems with going faster, and you already mentioned the sonic boom, and this is just a really nasty thing to deal with. The way Concorde dealt with it is to just go first to fly over the ocean, and then speed up to supersonic speed, and then the sonic boom is above ocean, but nobody cares.
Yeah, I can imagine that if you're flying from London or Paris, which were the headquarters, of course, of the two mentioned carriers, then you could just easily fly to the North Sea or the Atlantic Ocean, is it called?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And start going like really fast over there.
Yeah, so indeed, and that worked. But even then, there are some more problems, because there is this transition range, that is called the transonic range, and it goes from like 0.88 or Mach 0.88 to Mach 1. And what happens there in that range of speed is that the drag coefficient exponentially grows until it is like, I think, 4 times higher than at lower speeds, and then it drops off again. But even then, after Mach 1.2, I think it's still quite higher than on lower speeds.
I did not know that, actually, but what I did know is that for ships, you've got the exact same phenomenon. You've got the most economic speed, which is like 0.8 or 0.9, what they call the limit speed, I think it was in English. It's not an actual limit, because a speedboat can go through it, which is something like going higher than Mach 1. It's like passing the sound barrier. But ships also have the phenomenon that just before you reach that limit speed, a drag significantly increases.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense, because like air and water, it's basically the same principles, except like the density and the viscosity is maybe a bit different, but same principles apply.
Uh-huh.
Also, one thing that makes it harder to fly these things is that the lift to drag ratio changes when you go faster. And this means that you need more fuel or higher thrust to go at these higher speeds. And that also makes it pretty damn expensive to fly a Concorde.
I thought lift was also in the order of speed squared, but I could be mistaken about that. Let me Google that. I want to know stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Lift is indeed also velocity squared. But maybe those things change when you're talking about high velocities.
Let's see, the Concorde had a very high drag, a lift to drag ratio of about 4 at slow speed, but it traveled at high speed for most of the flight. Yeah, okay. So because you're designing your wings in such a way that it has a very high lift to drag ratio at higher speeds, it might be very well the case that at lower speeds it has a low lift to drag ratio.
Yeah, right. You engineer your wings for a certain speed, and when you do not have that speed, effects could be a whole lot different than you actually want, of course.
Yes, and also like the fuselage is also designed to these parameters, and since your speed range is so big, it would be optimal to change the shape of the fuselage, but that would also introduce many more other problems that are not really worth it.
Yeah, what you want, of course, is the minimal fuelage you can have for the whole trip. If that means it's less optimal at the start and at the beginning, I mean at the start and at the end, then, well, it's a downside, but you have to take that in mind. And if you can optimize it for the thousands of kilometers transatlantic, that is the part you want to optimize.
Yeah, exactly. It's optimized for the biggest part of the flight, and that makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, these things cause the Concorde to be actually pretty expensive to fly. And do you have any idea how much it takes to fly from New York to London?
You mean in dollars?
Yeah, with today's airplanes or tickets.
Oh, I've looked about that. I think it's $1,000 a round trip, maybe a bit more, 1,000 euros.
Yeah, so around like $1,300 or $1,400. Something like that.
Quite expensive, but the Concorde was way more expensive, right?
Exactly, yeah. So to do a round trip, it would cost you $12,000.
Okay, so that's like
10 times as
10
much.
times more expensive. Yeah, and it's like 2 or 3 times faster.
Yeah, so you can go from, I think, London to New York in 3 hours instead of the 6 to 7 hours it takes. So yeah, about twice as fast.
Not quite impressive, though.
Yeah, but even then, it's so, and that's also the reason why I think not many aircraft companies care about this, is because it's not very marketable to the passenger to sell a very fast plane when that comes at the cost of like doubling your price, or wait, no, tenfolding your price.
You would only do that if you were like really rich, or you had the money and wanted to have the experience.
Yeah, exactly. So there are, and that's another thing that strike me as pretty interesting. There is actually only one like comparable airplane to the Concorde. There never has been any other airplane like it. So the other one was, it flew, by the way, also only for 1 year. It was the Tupolev Tu-144.
Okay, and that could it go faster than the Concorde? What do I have to take in mind?
Let me see. It had a cruise speed of around 2,000 kilometers, so Mach 2. Let me look that up. Concorde has a cruise speed of Mach 2.02, so it was faster.
Okay, that's quite impressive.
But I think it carried less passengers, because Concorde could carry 128 passengers, whereas the Tu-144 could only carry 55 passengers.
What you might not know, though, is I came across this a couple of weeks ago. There is a startup called Boom Supersonic.
Yes, I actually have that in my notes.
Which does want to make the flights affordable again. But you were going to talk about that.
Well, I was just briefly going to mention that indeed. The Concorde stopped in 2003. There don't seem to be that many successors, but indeed there are a couple of projects that seek to like restore the speed of the Concorde on an economical basis, or economical viable way. And indeed the XB1, or so-called Baby Boom, is the first demonstrator plane, but it's still, let's see, it's 1/3 the size of the actual plane, and it should fly supersonically in 2019, and even then it's the question when it will be available to the public.
I've got a picture of it, and it does look quite good, man. It's like the Tesla of aircraft.
Yeah, indeed. And there is also another one, that's the Spike S512. It houses a few less passengers. I think it's only 12, so or 18. It's really a business plane. But yeah, the maximum speed should still be about Mach 1.8.
Which is a bit slower though than the Concorde did.
Yeah, but even then, if it's a whole lot safer, it's still worth it.
Of course, but like you said, it does need a lot more fuel. So it's hard to market that, I think.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll see if the airplane of the future will be faster. At least the reason why, like, normal airliners fly at what's it, about 980 kilometers per second is because that's at the lower bound of the transonic range. So
it's like 0.88
yeah, Mach
max,
0.88, yeah. So it's that's about 980 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, the most economical speed.
Yeah, and if
makes sense.
Indeed. So that's it about faster. Whole lot of troubles. And yeah, probably we're not going to see a much faster plane in the foreseeable future, at least on the large scale for many people. And yeah, so the other problem is, would be nice if aircrafts could be safer. But I think I'm going to skip this because the too long didn't read is the aircrafts are already pretty safe and can't really make them much safer. Well, you can.
If you want to see a GIF of something that looks not really safe and is quite recent, you should check the show notes. I do not have it over here, but it's quite disturbing to watch.
Okay.
Just a tip, do not watch it just before you're about to enter a plane.
Yeah, but still maybe it's still interesting to name a couple numbers, because this episode is not so much about all the technology. It's more about grasping the idea why aircrafts have not been changed so much. And if you're talking about safety, for example, in 2014, the global jet accident rate was 0.23, which is the equivalent of one accident for every 4.4 million flights. So
okay. When you translate that to kilometers, do you know what that means?
So these numbers are actually pretty hard to compare because there are different metrics to measure this. Also, accident rate and death rate, hull loss, all these sort of things make it kind of hard to compare. To give you another perspective, let me tell you this: between 2000 and 2010 in the United States, the number of deaths per passenger mile was about 0.2 deaths per 10 billion passenger miles. While for driving, the rate was 1.5 per 100 million vehicle miles for only 2000, which is 150 deaths per 10 billion miles, whereas airplanes only had 0.2 deaths per 10 billion passenger miles.
Oh, that's quite significant, right? That's like factor... What was it?
So we had a death rate of 150 deaths per 10 billion miles for driving, divided by 0.2 deaths per 10 billion passenger miles for aviation, equals a factor of 750.
Oh, that's quite good.
Yeah, exactly. Also, yeah, if you want to make aircraft safer, there are so many things that you could improve: the reliability of the sensors, the mechanics on the ground, to give them proper training, the pilots, of course, so they can handle exceptional situations. There is even cockpit design matters when it comes to safety, because some accidents have been caused by confusion from the pilot.
Oh, that's awesome. If your design of the cockpit can influence that, there's got to be some weird psychology, or how do you call that?
Yeah, well, so in the 1970s, they introduced this principle of the glass cockpits, and that meant that more instruments, I think, got digitalized. But this also meant that the pilots can suffer from data overload or information overload, and especially in dangerous situations, it's pretty easy to lose your cool and then still make sense out of all the data that's coming towards you.
Yeah, you already noticed that when you're gaming, for example, Age of Empires, when multiple people are attacking you from both sides, you do not know what to do. It's just a data overload. And if you would look at it closely, you know what to do, right?
Absolutely. But I mean, I'm not a pilot, and that's a good thing, because if something would happen, I would totally panic and probably crash the airplane. So
just like you do when you're playing Age of Empires.
Exactly. So good thing I'm not a pilot.
Indeed.
So that's already pretty specific, but to get even more specific is checklist design, because when exceptional situations happen, or accidents happen, pilots usually have a checklist of what they have to do to fix an error or something like that. But even there can be confusion in the checklist when steps on what to do are not clear, even when you have seconds before disaster, literally seconds.
I was watching Mayday, or like it's called in Europe, it's air crash investigation.
Yeah.
And this episode was about a crash. I do not remember which one it was. Anyway, all the pilots were Chinese, and they did not know how to speak English. They just knew the terms they needed to fly an aircraft. Like, they've got a few signals, what you have to say to the air management folks. How do you call that?
Air traffic control?
Definitely that one. But they did not know how to say things in English. So they had a problem. They took the checklists. They did not understand a single word, and that was a problem.
Yeah. So, but that's not at the checklist design. That's more that pilots should know English, not at the basic level.
No, but that's just a fun fact. I knew.
And also, like, what steps to do when. Sometimes it makes way more sense to do one of the last steps first, but checklist designers need to think about this, about what is the most probable cause, and what can you do to, like, fix that cause. And yeah, that's just really complicated to think about, because you also need to understand how people think, how people read, and what problem belongs to what solution, and so on. So it's hugely complicated.
It is, definitely.
So yeah, luckily, a lot of people have thought about this. Also, luckily, or well, maybe sadly, one of the ways to make safety better is by looking at accidents and say, how can we improve this? But it also means it needs to go wrong once before we learn from that. But yeah, let's hope at least that the mortality rate stays the same or goes down.
Let's hope my plane doesn't crash tomorrow.
Yes. And before we make the bridge, because that would have been a good one, I still wanted to talk about electric, because I'm hugely fascinated by electric planes.
I am as well. What is the world record at the moment for longest distance flight for electric planes, actually?
Around the globe.
Around the globe?
Yes.
Like non-stop?
Kind of non-stop, because, of course, the limiting factor here is the pilot. A pilot can't sit in a plane for longer than, I don't know, a couple weeks, I guess. If you take...
Okay, so you need a couple of pilots, but that's not practical as well.
Yeah, so...
Tell me, how did they do it? How did they do it?
Yeah, so funny that you asked, because I looked into this, and that was actually... I wanted to give some prototypes first. But yeah, let's dive right into this project called Solar Impulse. It's a privately financed project. One of the guys is Bertrand Piccard. Piccard?
Deutsch?
No, Swiss, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the Solar Impulse 2, I think it was the Solar Impulse 2, at least. That was like completed in 2014, and on March 9th, 2050, these two guys began to circumnavigate the globe with the Solar Impulse 2. They started from Abu Dhabi, and I think in 17 stages they wanted to navigate the globe. I think the longest stage was from Japan to Hawaii. That was the longest.
Which is how many kilometers?
Oh, I wouldn't know, but a lot.
Okay, I'll look this up in the meantime.
Yeah, sure. And they wanted to complete... I'm not sure. They were planning, I think, to do it in like a year or so. But sadly, they had a technical problem with some of the batteries, and they had to stay on the ground for a couple months to fix the airplane. But it took them, in the end, 16 months before...
To fix the airplane? Or
to finish the circumnavigation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was already a bit surprised. Hawaii to Japan, by the way, is 6,400 kilometers.
Wow.
So yeah, that's quite far. Mm-hmm.
And also the statistics of this airplane are pretty interesting. It's the cruise speed is 90 kilometers per hour during the day, which is pretty fast. 60 kilometers per hour during the night, because they want to save power that way.
Of course.
And their maximum speed is 140 kilometers per hour.
It's not that fast.
It's not that fast, but it's still pretty fast compared to, for example, another prototype I looked into was the NASA Pathfinder, which was one of the first full electric planes. And this guy flew at only 24 kilometers per hour.
How are you able to fly at that speed?
Well, the brothers Wright did it at 11 kilometers per hour, right?
Yeah, but like for 20 meters.
Yeah, okay, so the Pathfinder it's more gliding than flying almost, and that makes sense, right? Because the engines have to be very power efficient.
And your lift to drag ratio has to be like really high.
Yeah, and this is the very reason that these guys have usually a huge wingspan for their actual size. Because the wingspan of the Pathfinder was 37 meters.
But you also need that to make space for the electric cells, right?
Yeah, of course, for the solar cells. And talking about solar cells, also this is, by the way, a video of the Helios taking off, and notice how wobbly it is.
Let me check that out.
Also how big it is, but especially how wobbly
Holy cow. When you think about the cockpit, if that's the size of an actual human, even a bit larger, of course.
A little bit, yeah.
His wings are insane.
Yeah, they are. I think they're usually huge.
But you're right, it's indeed so wobbly. Which does make sense though, because deflection is like the fourth power of the length.
Yeah.
And if it's that thin, then you would have to have so much deflection.
So yeah, this thing was unmanned, and what to me was pretty surprising is the weight. It's only 50 kilograms.
It is?
Yeah. So I
could lift that.
If you would put me on it, then it would like double in weight.
Triple, you mean?
Nah. so yeah, but of course you need a very lightweight because, and this is what I wanted to get to, is solar cells. I know it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but to get some numbers in your head, the watts per square meter that get to the surface from the sun is 1360 watts per square meter.
Is that a lot? I do not know.
Yeah, okay. I'll if you keep listening, then you might understand how much it is.
Okay, 1360. You said.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the theoretical limit of solar cells is 49%. Like you can't do any better than that. Theoretically.
That has to do with physics.
Yes, because physics.
Okay.
So yeah, as a side note, the solar cells of these things are more in the order of 13%. But okay, let's assume 49%, right? We have then to our disposal 670 watts per square meter. And
if you take into the account the best possible conversion rate.
Yeah, theoretical limit.
Yeah, okay.
And my water boiler is 1900 watts. So you need like 3 square meters to power my water boiler.
Okay, that's insane.
Yeah, so that's why the wingspan, partly that's why also the wingspan is so big. Yeah, and of course the water boiler is still a hugely inefficient thing. So that is also maybe the reason why in the near future we won't be able to carry that many passengers, because improving solar cells in efficiency is already pretty hard. Then putting it on an airplane, making sure that you have batteries so you can keep flying, and then still upscale it to carry, say, 50 passengers, that's still pretty far away.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's hard to use other techniques, because wind-powered is, of course, a bit stupid to do, because you would only create extra drag, and there is not much else to use, I guess.
One thing that the aviation industry is looking into, like last couple of years and coming years, is, for example, biofuels. And that would already at least reduce greenhouse gases quite a bit.
Okay, but are those as efficient as like diesel, or what are they using?
Kerosene.
Kerosene,
yes.
Of course.
I'm not sure because I didn't look that much into this. Another thing, for example, that is already happening is to blend in biofuels. So only you make a certain percentage and then use
a mixture of the two.
Yes, and that's already a nice way to make aircrafts a little bit more environmentally friendly. But really, the problem is that air traffic is gonna exponentially grow still, and I also looked this up. It's about like 2% of the global greenhouse gas emission is because of aviation. So if our airplanes are not really going to become much more environmentally friendly, but the traffic is going to grow exponentially, then we have a problem.
Yeah, it does, because it is a limited source, and we have to take that in mind.
Yeah, and well, this is again sidetracking a bit, but if we need those fuels also to produce stuff, and maybe more importantly to transport goods, so we really need the fuels.
Which could also be an airplane, but
yeah, but well, so if you don't do it with airplane, but with ship, even then, you need fuel somehow. So either we need to produce things locally, but that's also not convenient because we don't have that much land, especially in the Netherlands. Or we need green solutions to transport. But okay, that's another topic.
It is. It could be a topic another time, green fuelage or something. We will be discussing that.
So whether airplanes will become more energy efficient or not, at least we'll have the globe for some 100 years in advance. And by that time, you also will have the time to visit our website. And you, Ollie, to get to Athens and hopefully get back in good health.
Definitely. So, ageoftechpodcast.com.
Yes.
And
where?
That's the most important thing.
Of course.
And of course, YouTube and SoundCloud, iTunes, and all those other familiar and all those other
familiar places, because Ollie can't speak.
That's exactly what I wanted to say, but it just didn't come out right.
All right, thank you all for listening in, and see you next time.
Adios.